Now let's look at document B. We're going to start with, again, the what do you see? It's the simplest way to bring about the information. So what do we see? We can see that this is an organelle. This organelle is a chloroplast. It labels it clearly. We know that because here's the label. This organelle uses light, or we can say the chloroplast uses light. We can see that right here. We see that it uses water and oxygen. H2O is water and, excuse me, not oxygen, carbon dioxide. We see that it uses light, it uses water, and it uses carbon dioxide. We can see that there are two things going on here. We've got a light reaction and the Calvin cycle. So we have two processes occurring, which would be the light reaction and the Calvin cycle. I'm spelling that correctly. Calvin cycle. Okay. We can also see that we see NADP, we see ATP, we see NADPH, and ADP are cycling through these two processes. More specifically, we can see that light reaction is producing ATP and NADPH. And we see that it's using okay, water, NADP, ADP, and light. Okay, we can also see that the Calvin cycle is using ATP, NADPH, and it's also using carbon dioxide to produce sugar. We should say glucose. We'll say sugar. It's used to produce sugar. And our light reaction is producing oxygen. Okay. This entire process is not mentioned here, but we can now that we've actually gone through all of these things that we see, we know, okay, chloroplast obviously is going to be a science term. And in the chloroplast, we know that this process is photosynthesis. We know light reaction. We know Calvin cycle. ATP, ADP, NADPH, and NADP. light, glucose, oxygen. Again, we have carbon dioxide. We have and water. Okay. Some other terminology that might jog our brain here would be chloroplasts are found in autotrophs. Those are organisms that make their own food. They make their own glucose. Chlorophyll is used in this process. We also call the Calvin cycle, there's another term for it. The Calvin cycle, it can also be called the dark reaction or the light independent reaction. Light independent reaction. Okay. So science, the science vocabulary terms as they relate to the document. If you can think of more, you can certainly add more. But this is all about photosynthesis and producing glucose and oxygen. So let's get to what does this mean? Well, it means that chloroplasts these are organelles in organisms, autotrophic organisms that use carbon dioxide and water as well as ATP and light energy to produce glucose and oxygen. Okay, that's what this means. And why does it matter? Why does this matter in terms of our writing prompt? Well, photosynthesis uses products of cellular respiration. And that would be carbon dioxide and water. Okay, to produce glucose and oxygen. Cellular respiration requires glucose and oxygen. To produce ATP, right? Okay. ATP, in addition, ATP, we'll say adenosine triphosphate, releases energy when it loses a phosphate group. I think I have one too many O's in there. When it loses a phosphate group, and becomes ADP, adenosine diphosphate. Okay, so here you have a full annotation of document B. I'm sure there's some thoughts that you have individually on this particular document, but it's really important, again, to start with the basics and head into that vocabulary. See if you can jog your memory of what vocabulary you have, and then figure out what does it mean and why does it matter.